All right, so we're ready for the next step to get into contouring. It's called a couple of different things: contouring, DB for dodge and burn. But basically, what we're going to do is bring up a couple of curves, one that brightens, one that darkens just a bit, and we're going to use those to even out areas of fluctuation of value. So before FS 2.0, which I just showed you, there was much more emphasis on what I'll just call DB, dodge and burn. So it's a technique that's been around for a long time. It works great. It's wonderful. A lot of people rely on it. A lot of people will continue to rely on it even after these changes to frequency separation that we went over. So the choice is yours. I'll show you how I do it. I don't emphasize DB that much now because I've got these other tools to handle the changes that I would have needed to make using this type of work in dodge and burn. But I still use it, it's still effective, so I'll show you what I do. All right, I'm going to go into full screen because I like working in full screen. I can move the image around. As you can see, actually before I go into full screen, this image is starting to get big. It's approaching 5 gig working file. So depending on your setup, you might be starting to slow down right now. That's perfectly normal. So the thing to think about is we can look in our layer groups, and we've still got these base smart objects. But now you've done your FS, your frequency separation. On top of those, they are actually really not necessary to keep around anymore. And you can save some file size by ditching those. So let's just do that now. Free up some system resources. Should see this value dropping. And if you're not seeing this value in the bottom of your screen, just click on the arrow and put it on document sizes. It might be set to document profile. We know we're working in Adobe RGB. Set it to document sizes, then you can see these changes happening in real time. So ditch that. Now once again, this is because the frequency separation that we created basically stamps up. That's what we call merging up some layers. Maybe just one layer or multiple layers. If you stamp up, that creates a new base pixel layer. You don't really need what's under it, but I'll show you something else that I do as backup. So I've ditched. I'm going to keep this one in tongue logo because I didn't do a frequency separation in there. So let's just hold on to that. And I'm going to keep the base one because I just want that as backup. I always keep backups of everything because if you back up, something happens, change is needed, you have to go back, that will save your ass. So let's just save a new version of our file called V2. And I'm saving in large document format because we're hitting those huge file sizes, so you don't want to be saving as a PSD. You want to be saving as a PSB, large document format, so you don't run into any error messages because Photoshop doesn't like it when you go above a certain file size for their native PSD format. Another interesting little tidbit, Photoshop always seems to get stuck saving at 83%. I have no idea why. You're going to see that happen a lot on big files. So we're set up the file size. We've shaved off about 0.6 gigs. That's cool. That'll give us a little bit of a performance bump. Once you start working in big files, you'll take whatever you can get. There are other steps we could take to reduce the file size if it was really critical, such as you could stamp up your freq-sep, which I call that for short. You could also ditch these low smart objects if you needed to. If you're working on a machine that just is chunking right now, you should do these things and just save backup files and just try to trim down your file size as much as you can by stamping up, and just go back if you need to. You may not need to. So that was just some housekeeping. Let's move on to contouring with dodge and burn. Basically what I do is create two curves. I'm just going to do this right in the main shoe group rather than in the individual breakout groups here, but I may go into those later and do more targeted DB work within those. So I'm going to bring up two curves, and one I'm just going to name minus, not underscore, minus. The other one I'm going to name plus. So on the plus curve, I'm going to raise it. If your curves are organized like this, raising lightens, and just this much, it's just a touch, and minus is going to darken just a touch. I'm going to fill those masks with black because that's what I'm going to paint into to make these little changes. Going to go back into full screen, start with the toe. So this first step is basically to fix things. So I usually refer to this as DB, as the DB step or the dodge and burn step, but dodge and burn and contour are kind of interchangeable. So, but think of it in this way. The first pass is going to be to fix stuff, and the second pass is going to be to enhance stuff. So it's like fixing versus beauty. Think of it like that. Separate those two so you're not overlapping those two intentions or processes. So I've got my plus minus. I also want to set these to luminosity just to ensure that I'm not introducing any hue shifts with these moves that I'm doing. So minus is to darken, plus is to lighten. I'm going to just go in and start lightly brushing using my brush tool. I'm going to start off with just the opacity at 10%. It's not super critical in this case whether you're using opacity or flow in my experience, because it's not that touchy. Some people really like to use flow at this stage, and I find with this stuff we're not making very minute changes. It's not that important right now, but if you find that the opacity being at 10% isn't enough, you'll reduce flow, and we might end up having to do that here. Okay, so I'm going to just start brushing in the minus layer, just really lightly. You might not even be able to see these changes really occurring because they are so small, but that's exactly what we want. We want to make really subtle adjustments to the luminosity in different areas of the image. Once again, they're just small steps that add up to the whole process. So I'll turn this layer on and off, and now you'll be able to see there's a little shift in there. But what I've done is soften that transition from light to dark there, which was creating an edge that I could see. Yeah, so really what I'm looking for here are value shifts that make things look like there may be a mistake or an error in manufacturing or something like that. So when I evened that out, I was seeing just a little bit of an edge here that just made me feel like something underneath this fabric, something in the structure of the shoe underneath was showing through. And I don't think that that's important to really show the product. It's not a feature that you care about when you're looking at this image, and I think it's a little bit distracting. So what you're looking for are these little subtle distractions, and you're slowly just chipping away at those distractions in order to create this like finished and cohesive image that is just a singular statement that you can read really fast without looking at, you know, imperfections. Imperfections are distractions basically, and we're trying to eliminate all of those. So I see a little value shift in here that I don't like, so I can start darkening these areas. So, you know, as you can see, these are really subtle changes that we're doing, and it takes a lot of sort of like hard looking at the image. I know what to look for because I do this every day. If you're having a hard time sort of seeing these things, one thing you can do is just, and I'm going to group these. I'm just going to call them DB. One thing you can do to maybe see better or change the way you're looking at the image is to just add a big contrast curve to enhance the contrast in the image. And it sort of just exaggerates everything. So, I mean, this is actually pretty useful even after you've done your DB to check with this, because you might, after, you know, just pushing the contrast, see that you maybe didn't go quite as far as you needed to with the initial pass. You can also, since right now we're just looking at value, we don't care about hue. We don't care about color at all in this situation. So you could bring up a hue set and just desaturate the whole thing too. If you're having a hard time sort of visually separating color and value. And stuff like this, I refer to as visualizers. People use different terms, but that is the most accurate to me. So you can turn that on and off. And let's just work in that space for a little bit and see how that feels. Let's do an on-off of that. So you can see we're just like smoothing stuff out, really. I kind of personally feel better working in the native file, but that's one of those things that is totally up to you. So I'm just working on the darken layer. This is another situation where you can work micro to macro and increase your opacity of your brush if you want to make more dramatic, bigger changes. So what I've noticed here is that the issue of the softness of the mask back here that I mentioned earlier, I never addressed that. And that's, I mean, you know, that's classic. You're going to know you're going to come up with things you need to fix, and you're going to forget about it. You're going to miss it. So while we want to rely completely on the process and the steps and just continually go through in a linear fashion, there's some, there's plenty of times that you're going to notice stuff that you miss. So you have to step back, step out of it. Don't just stick to the system. Don't just stick to the process just for the sake of that, because when you notice something you missed, you got to fix it. So in this case, I want to soften this mask edge right here because the focus is different on the back of this return than it is on the front. I've got the mask set up nicely for most of the image, and that should be your rule of thumb. Just make sure it works for most of the image, and then places where the focus falls off, you're going to fix that manually. You're going to fix that by hand, and I'm going to show you how it's really easy. It looks like it might be daunting, but it's totally not. You can fix it using one of the most basic pixel manipulation tools, the blur tool, which isn't good for anything much except for this. You don't want to run this on pixels. You want to use it for masks. So 50% is good. I'm going to increase the brush size, and I'm going to just start brushing this mask. Now, these changes with the blur tool happen very slowly, which is good. It's a very subtle tool, but you can see the change here that it's already softening as opposed to down here. You can also hold down Option and click your mask to see the changes. Sometimes this will help you because in this case you're just looking at the mask and you can see the softening happen in real time. And like I said, it happens slowly, which is good because we just want to make little changes. We want to be able to control that with a good degree of accuracy and not make it too soft. The next thing we'll have to do is just check to see if we've introduced any edges. We also do that at the end of our retouching. Another pass, an edge check pass. But we'll do it now too. That looks pretty good. I love that because what these little changes do is give you that connection to reality, and these things make it look less cut out, less photoshopped, and that's what you want to do. You want to make it look real, and people notice when things look fake. Also noticing some softness right here. So this is another point where I might step back and go back into my base and see if I can fix that a little bit because I don't like that. So this is another point where I'm stepping back a little bit, and I can return to that dodge and burn process at any stage. I just need to remember that that's next. So what I'm going to do is just take a look and see where that softness is happening, and I think I'm pretty sure it happened at that frequency separation stage when I was pushing some of the underlying value around under there. Yeah. So that's what happens when you change underlying value, and the high frequency information in these areas, like where there's shadow underneath, doesn't hold the same level of detail that it does in the brighter areas. You'll notice this as a challenge when using frequency separation on really high intensity, high frequency objects. And there are a couple of things we can do to try to fix it. One of them might be to back off the frequency separation that we did, and that might not be the best way to deal with that area. It's not perfect for every single situation under the sun, but it works great for most things. Let's see if we can deal with that. I like that the change in luminosity there in value is lightening that area. A little trick that I use to try to bring back detail or enhance high frequency information is to duplicate the high, clip it again by hitting Command Option G, so it's attached to this high layer, but I'm going to set the blend mode to overlay. So what that's doing is cranking up the contrast on this layer, which is essentially what we want to do. I'm going to put a mask on that because I'm just going to brush it in and see if that fixes the problem a little bit. Brush is on 40%. Just going to see if we can bring back some detail in there. So yeah, I think this is starting to work pretty nicely. You don't want to overdo it here, but I think it's bringing back or adding or enhancing detail in that area where it was lost previously. This is a pretty reliable trick to bring back some detail. It can sometimes be a little bit too sharp, so watch out for that, but I'll turn it on and off, show you before and after. That to me is a nice fix. This area is still a little bit clunky and I might need to do some fixes here later. That area keeps catching my eye. That should be an indicator to you, like if you step away from your image and come back to it, which I highly recommend, anything that's catching your eye, take a moment to consider it. If it's a feature, then go ahead and keep it. But if it's a bug or it's an error, you might want to think about addressing that, because if it catches your eye, it's going to catch somebody else's eye. And therefore it's a distraction. So I'll deal with this later. So when I turn this frequency separation back on, notice that this error comes back because every frequency separation group is a stamp up. So it's showing what I had previously done in here. So I'm going to brush this out. This frequency separation now has a mask on it. I'm going to paint in there with black. So this area of the frequency separation that I've done above the FS big is now removed from this area, so I can see the change that I did there to bring that texture back. Okay, it was a little detour. You're gonna have to be able to deal with those situations. You're gonna have to take detours and then come back to the step that you were originally on, the path you were originally on, which was our DB. Let's get back to it. So I'm looking for any more areas that I can either lighten or darken a little bit with the DB. Looks like right here there's a little bit of a change. Maybe I can darken that down a bit. Okay, you can see that that was way too much because I accidentally had my brush opacity back up at 100. So it darkened way too much. Let's undo that. And put that brush back down at like 20. See how that works? And maybe be a little bit more careful with where we're brushing. Yeah, that brought that down a bit. All right, so let's keep looking around the shoe. right, so now I'm looking at the swoosh. And I definitely see an area where there's a shift. I'll give you a second to see if you can spot the same area that I'm looking at here. Take a look in the swoosh. If you can't see it, I'm going to show you a little trick that will help you see these shifts, because the longer you stare at an image, it kind of burns into your eyes, and it's hard to see stuff. But switch to the hand tool, holding down the space bar, and kind of just move the image back and forth. This is a little trick that I use to see subtle variation or things that I can't normally perceive just by staring at something. This is also an excellent trick to use if you've done some cloning and you're looking for repeats. If you've done some cloning, you know what I mean. You want to not repeat any textural or identifiable pixel features. And this is a great trick to kind of dislodge your eyes from the image a little bit. And if you're looking at what I'm looking at in the swoosh, there's this shift in luminosity right here. And hopefully moving that back and forth helped you see that even better. So it certainly did for me. So now I'm going to go to my plus dB layer and do a little bit of work in there. So this change in value here that created a little bit of an edge, this is something that I really could have fixed using frequency separation. And with this frequency separation 2.0, as we're calling it, that would have been a lot easier even to fix, because with the mixer brush I could have just really easily wiped that off. But this is really representative of the actual process, because we're going through all these steps so that nothing is missed. Some of this dB work is really essentially picking up things that we may have missed in our frequency separation step, which is totally okay. Zoom out to see what's going on can help. I'm going to turn that off and on. So painting in on the plus layer there is just basically removed that transition into that dark area that created an edge. So that's good. Overall in the swoosh though, there seem to be some variations in value. This is lighter, this is darker, this is darker. And we can see that better if we just kind of do the shake. I'm going to reduce my opacity to 10. I'm not worried about making this exactly perfect, but I just want to draw attention away from these variations in value. Especially on something like this, like a client logo, which they're always very, very precious about. You should pay it extra care to your client's brand elements. You also notice in Photoshop, at least this version for many previous versions, once we get to these file sizes, you're going to notice some weird performance stuff that happens when you're brushing. We've seen things that we call like sticky brush, where you won't be able to exit your brush. You won't be able to change tools, and the brush will kind of hang up for a bit. It just gets basically sticky. The best solution is to just wait for a minute and see if it comes back to life. And if not, click somewhere else in the image or try clicking on a layer. Don't do a ton of clicking around because depending on your system, Photoshop could crash at that stage. But usually doing one of those steps or all of those steps, the brush will sort of fix itself and then continue to work properly. But this is something to look out for in Photoshop when working on large files particularly. All right, so I think we've done quite a bit to even out the swoosh. Let's do before, after. Looks pretty good. I'm fine with that. I think that is quite enough. So we've kind of gone through the micro. There's much more obsessing we could do over things, which I'm okay with if I have plenty of time and it's actually making good progress. But once you get down to just really splitting hairs, it's probably time to back off and call it good and let your client call out anything he or she sees when you send them first round. There's a threshold to get to. You could keep working at the molecular level on your image for days and days, but you've got to get this stuff done, off to the client, and you don't want to show them any mistakes, but you also want to give them a little bit of space to make their own comments. There's something in the process of retouch or client relationship where clients will always want to mark something up on your image. And in fact, they're paying for it. So it's an expected part of the process. Don't expect to get your work approved on first round. First round approvals are generally seen as a myth. It doesn't happen. When it does, that's amazing, but don't expect it. Expect your client to come back with some kind of comments. So don't agonize over the stuff that you can't control. Just do your best, follow the process, get it done, and expect to clean up a few extra specs when you get back first round feedback. So like I said, this first step in DB is for fixing stuff. And at this stage, I've fixed all the stuff I want to fix right now. I might come back to it, but I'm good for now. So the next step, right, is to improve stuff. So I'm just gonna duplicate my plus layer. I'm gonna name it plus plus. And I'm gonna duplicate my minus layer, and I'm gonna name it minus, not underscore, minus minus. And I'm going to fill those masks again with black so I'm not duplicating my work. You can check your mask by holding down Option to make sure that you actually did fill it in with black. So these are going to be more like my beauty layers, so I could even turn up the volume on these curves just a little bit. And I'm going to do a little bit of this is more like contouring in the traditional sense. I kind of want to darken this area here a bit so I can turn it down, make it look like it's turning down, because this area is dark, but this kind of lights up, and I kind of want to tuck that back just a little bit. So I'm gonna paint in there like that. But you know what? This is getting on the blue mid-sole area, and I don't want that, so I'm gonna actually drop this into the base. So it probably went to the bottom of the stack in there. So, oh no, it stayed at the top. That way it doesn't get on the blue midsole. So now you see we were doing everything on the top that was what I call kind of overall color and luminosity. So this is a little bit more targeted when you make this change to put something into one of the subgroups here. So, and think about it, this isn't something you would have been able to do this easily if you hadn't followed this process and set everything up in the beginning. So that was effortless. Think about the alternative. If you hadn't clipped out this whole shoe, at this stage, when you're doing all this, when you're thinking in the mode of shaping and beauty, you would have had to stop, switch your brain over, pull out your pen tool or your brush tool, and you would have had to find a way to isolate that edge. That's not something I want to do at this stage. That's too painful for me to switch back and forth between those two modes of thinking. I want to limit that as much as possible. All right, so I can leave that there in the base, and I can go back up and redo this minus minus layer. And start working again. But honestly, there's not a whole lot on this shoe that I want to mess with right now because I think it's really pretty nicely shaped. I think what I might do is just darken a little bit here on the back edge, and we'll have to see how that works once we put it on the background. Maybe a little bit here on the back edge of the return. I forgot to turn the volume up on that. Let's see. I don't know, that's hard to say on the return here. I don't know if I like that at all. It kind of brings it forward a bit. So I'm gonna erase that. I don't like that. Yeah, in terms of shaping right now, there's not much more I want to do on the shoe at this stage. I think it looks pretty good. You know what? I just saw one thing that I'm gonna do is continue this sort of bright area up here because I like the form and the shape of this panel right here. And actually maybe brighten here a little bit. This is kind of going back into fixing, but that's okay. All right, so at this stage, this is really all the contouring and DB that I want to do on the shoe. Once we get this into the color environment with the background that we're going to use that Adam set up, we might see different things or make different choices because it's going to look different on that background as opposed to what we're seeing it on now, which is gray. So let's just take a look at the before and after. Before, after, before, after. So this is a good step to do because I think that this little thing on the back of the blue midsole, which I know is on my minus minus layer, it's a little bit clunky in terms of the edge here. I want to push that back, and I'm going to show you a really specialized tool to manipulate your masks. We've already seen the blur tool, but one of the great forgotten tools for mask manipulation is the smudge tool. Most people, when I talk about the smudge tool with retouchers, and I say I love the smudge tool, they think that I'm joking because it's such a sort of simple tool. It's seen as finger painting, you know. I don't think it's ever been really used for anything other than that. For me, the smudge tool is such a perfect tool to manipulate masks with because it allows me, just like the mixer brush tool in our FS 2.0, it allows me to push pixels around. But what it's perfectly suited for is manipulating masks. I'm going to show you how to use it right now. I usually keep it around 40 or 50%, but I can just push that mask. And that's wonderful because a brush tool might be a little bit clunky. This just works quickly, it's easy. Keep that in mind whenever you're manipulating masks. If you need to push it around, soften an edge even, use the smudge tool. We'll probably come back to that. So turning on and off our DB, you can see that this is another case of just making an incremental step forward. The changes here, not dramatic. They're small, but they're very meaningful, and it's done just another percentage, 5%, 10% to improve the quality, the efficiency, the communication of this image. So I'm happy with what we've done here, and now I'm ready to move on to the next step.